Genesis chapter 6, we were building up to the flood. Now, Genesis chapter 5, and 4, had gone out of the way to draw two distinct heritages, two distinct family lines, Cain's side and Seth's side of the lines. And we talked about how there would always be enmity between those two, always a conflict, always some tension. And that was promised in the garden to Eve by God when just after the fall as part of the curse on the snake. But that curse on the snake also turned out to be kind of a blessing for us, a promise for us as well, because someday he said that ultimate seed would come and restore what was messed up in the garden. The relationship with God would be restored, dominion of man would be returned over the earth, and things would be set back to the way they were designed to be. So chapters 4 and chapter 5 draw out those two distinct lines. Then we hit Genesis chapter 6, and the earth has become corrupted. Wickedness has overtaken the world. And by the time we get down to verse 8 of chapter 6, there's only one guy that God mentions that finds favor in his eyes. That guy's name is Noah. And we spent a little bit more time last week than you might have expected on the build-up of the first part of chapter 6 to the flood, talking about what really caused and precipitated the flood. Why did God do what he did? I put forth what I believe to be the answer. And in my belief and interpretation, I believe it's the melding of these two lines coming together, and God sees that his promise is in danger of not being fulfilled, and we can see that God is a promise-keeping God, and he will not allow that to happen. And so he decides to do something very large, something that is necessary to do to maintain his promise to the world. He says, if violence is overtaking the world and the good seed that I promised is being A, killed off, and B, those that are left are intermarrying and becoming corrupted, I'll have to do what I have to do, and I will destroy the entire world if I have to, but I will maintain my promise. And so he saves one faithful man, Noah. He didn't save any of Noah's cousins, none of Noah's brothers, none of Noah's uncles or aunts, anybody else. There was nobody else apparently left except for Noah, of course, his wife and his sons. So God rescues them on the ark, and God, he wipes everything else out from the entire planet. And Noah lands on the ground, and that's what we're going to start talking about today. Real estate got very, very cheap right after the flood. Noah was able to go down and rent a Manhattan apartment for nothing. Yeah, because demand was very low at that point. So pick it up back in Genesis chapter 6. You know what, actually, while we start back in chapter 5, we talked about Noah just a little bit. We introduced his name just a little bit before we got to last week, and I said, keep this in mind, we're going to come back to this, because we want to look at Noah a little bit more closely. Again, keep in mind the context, everything that we've talked about before, and see how all this fits in. Chapter 5, verse 28 says, when Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. Relief from our work and the painful toil of our hands. What does that sound like? Sounds almost like he's talking about the curse given back in Genesis 3, doesn't it? And so we see this introduction here, and we start to wonder, who is this Noah guy that's going to do all these things? In verse 29 of chapter 5, we just read that. Also look ahead to verse 8 of chapter 6. After everything we talked about last week, it says, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, this one who's going to bring relief from the work and the toil of their hands. And the very next verse, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his generation. He walked with God. Noah is a very special individual to come along. And so what's the natural question maybe that we can start to ask, or at least that the people of that time would have asked? What are we waiting for? What's everybody looking for? They're looking for the Savior that's to come, that's to fix and restore all things. Is Noah the chosen seed? It's starting to look pretty good for him, isn't it? We think that maybe he might be it. Finally, after 10 generations, God is finally going to restore things to the way they should be by sending this seed, this descendant of Eve, who will fix everything and restore the relationship with God and man's dominion on earth, and everything will be great again. In fact, we can continue to see clues about Noah and see what you think if Noah really is the seed as we look at these. Take a look at all these things here he does. In chapter 6, verse 18, skipping on down, pick it up in verse 17, it says, "For behold, I will bring a flood upon the waters, a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven." This is God pronouncing the flood to Noah. "Everything that's on the earth shall die, but I will establish my covenant with you, Noah, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark and keep them alive with you." Noah is going to be the only one rescued by God because he's righteous. In fact, just a couple verses ahead, chapter 7, verse 1, "Then the Lord said to Noah, Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." He's a righteous man. He's doing what God said. He finds favor in God's eyes. He's going to bring relief from the curse. In fact, he was very obedient. Back to chapter 6, verse 22. Take a look at this. "Noah did this," that is, follow all God's instructions. "He did all that God commanded him." Chapter 7, verse 5. "And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him." Same chapter, verse 9. Two and two, male and female, went into the ark as God had commanded Noah. Again in verse 16 we see, "And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in." So everything God commands, Noah does. He's very, very obedient. He finds grace in God's eyes, finds his favor. God's rescuing him. It's looking pretty good for Noah. But finally, as if that's not enough, look at chapter 8, verses 21 and 22. Pick it up in verse 20. "Noah built the ark to the Lord and took some of every clean animal, some of every clean bird, burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma," this is the sacrifice after the flood. "When the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man. For the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." God says, I will never again do this thing that I have done. And again, in chapter 9, I know we're skipping ahead just a little bit, but verses 8 through 17, I want to read this to you. "Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that's with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, and as many as came out of the ark, it is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that's with you for all generations. I have set my bow in the clouds," that'd be the rainbow, "and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And when I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that's between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I'll see it, and I'll remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that's on the earth." And God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." And after Noah, God says, "I will never, ever, ever do this again. I'll never punish the earth like this again because of what I've done here." So Noah's done all these things. He's obeyed God. He found God favor. After the flood that God brings upon the earth, God looks at Noah and says, "I will never have to do that again." Isn't that great? So what do we think of Noah? Pretty good? I think that's a pretty good sign. Is he the chosen seed? What do you think? Does he fit the description that we're looking for? Anybody? Was Noah it? I see some smiles, some happy faces. This is an encouraging sign. Now, again, from our perspective today, know the answer to that. But boy, back then it looked pretty good, didn't he? God brought a flood upon the whole earth. He wiped out every living thing on the earth except for this one family. And God saved the righteous family, and they came off the ark. And if the righteous survive and the wicked are gone, that means the whole earth is righteous. And God says, now I will never have to do this again. Wickedness has been taken care of. Righteousness prevails, and everything is good. Almost. there's one small problem with this plan, isn't it? Well, not with God's plan. I mean, he knew what was going on. But there's one problem with this situation, isn't there? That is that even though Noah is righteous overall, there's still that sinfulness in mankind. It's not really been taken care of. Wickedness has been judged and eliminated as far as that goes. You know, the whole society thing we talked about. But, well, let's take a look at a few other things that have been going on. We've kind of looked at all the good verses so far, haven't we? But there's a couple problems as well. Look at verse 2 of chapter 9. God blesses Noah and his sons and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens and upon everything that creeps out of the ground and on all flesh of the sea. Into your hand they will be delivered." Verse 3, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. As I gave you the green plants to eat, I give you everything now. But you shall not eat the flesh with the life, for that's in its blood, and for your lifeblood I will require reckoning. From every beast I will require it from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image." I have two things here that are a little disturbing to me if the sin problem has been taken care of. Number one is what? Animals are afraid of mankind now. That's not how it was in the garden. In the garden, everything was in perfect submission, and man was in the dominion over the animals, and everything was in very, very much in unity. But now God says, "I have made animals very afraid of you. They will run away. They're not going to come up to you when you call at all. The little cute little Bambis in the meadow and stuff, you can't just go up and pet them anymore. They will run away before you can get to them. The animals will absolutely not be in submission to you at this point." And in fact, he goes on to say, what else? Probably, at least part of the reason God did this is because now mankind is going to start eating the animals. It'd be probably poor news for the animals if they always come up and said, "Hi, mankind, how are you?" Boom, and there's, they have to survive somehow. So God makes them afraid of mankind. That's not how it was in the garden. We're not going the right direction at all. I thought wickedness was eliminated, and now mankind is running around eating the animals that he was supposed to care for, and the animals are afraid of him, and they're running away. This isn't the Garden of Eden all over again. But look what else happened. In chapter 9, verses 20 to 24, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth came and took a garment and laid it on both their shoulders and walked in backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backwards, and they didn't see their father's nakedness. When Noah woke from his wine and he knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." We see wickedness, we see curses going on, we see drunkenness, we see all kinds of things happening that shouldn't be happening if wickedness had been eliminated by the flood. Oh, dear. But another thing, finally we get to verse 28 of chapter 9, and we see, "After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he" what? And he died. And sin is still present on the earth. All these things that Noah was doing, all the encouraging signs that we saw coming from Noah. And God eliminated wickedness from the world. But even through the righteous family, Noah and his sons and his wife, all followers of God, we see something that's really startling, don't we? Wickedness isn't just something that the bad guys do. Wickedness is something that lives in all of us. It infects us all. Even the most righteous person carries this evil with them, this rebellion against God, this desire to do what God doesn't want me to do. I want to follow what I feel like I should be doing. And even the most righteous family, Noah and his family, we see this popping up right after the flood. And wickedness isn't solved, and Eden isn't restored. It's going to take more than just a flood to eliminate wickedness. What a discouragement. We realize that unfortunately Noah is not the chosen seed that God had promised. Even after all that God had gone through to eliminate the wickedness is still on earth. But he does kind of give us one of our very first pictures of what the seed might eventually look like, the things that he might kind of do in terms of saving humanity and judgment of wickedness. He also provides the avenue through which God's promise of the seed can continue. And I think that's the most important part of all. We talked last week of why God would have brought the flood in the first place. And we said that it was kind of two sides of the same coin, didn't we? It was to eliminate the wickedness on one hand, and God says that, to punish the wickedness of mankind. But the flip side of that, what? Is to preserve the righteous, to the promise that God had given to Eve. I will always preserve for you a line, a lineage through which the seed would come. And God accomplished both of those with the flood. Well, that brings us to chapter 10. In chapter 10, we see these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we said before that God had divided Genesis into chapters, and we see these are the generations, or this is the account of the sons of Noah. And so that starts in the next chapter. So chapter 10, then, continues with what? Another genealogy. Boring genealogies. I hate genealogies. Why does God waste my time with names of people that I don't care about, that I don't know who they are? Clearly, God is just a boring writer. That's the problem. We need to find a better writer to write the Bible, and we'd all be better off. Well, not really. What's the question we ask? Why did God put this in here? Why has God put all the other genealogies in here so far? Probably the answer is going to be pretty similar to the answer of chapter 10. So these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. I will not read all these names to you, but it starts out with the names of Japheth, and it starts to give a whole bunch of names there. And some of these names are names that we start to say, I think I've seen these before. A few of them are a little bit familiar. Gomer, Magog, Tubal, Meshech, and again, I'm not going to read all these. Look at verse 5. From these the coastland people spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. As I was reviewing, this verse popped out to me, just as kind of a side note trivia here. What does it say again, one more time? Each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. They spread out to the different areas, each with their own language. Why is that a curiosity? Why is that a curiosity? Does that pop out to anybody else? Because in chapter 11, which we haven't read yet, don't mean to spoil the story here for you, but in chapter 11 we see the Tower of, and God says, I can't have this. Mankind is all of one language, and they're all living together. Here it says they have spread out, and they each have their own language. Clearly, the Bible contradicts itself. Clearly. Come on, but why does it say each of his own language here in chapter 10, but in chapter 11, they say all of one language? Think with me now. This is important. I see somebody saying something. What was that?
Their descendants, it doesn't say that happened when Jacob first had it, so maybe it was after the tower.
Yeah, probably chapter 10. Chapter 10 is a long list genealogy, and chapter 11 zooms in on a specific story. They're not chronological, right? This isn't a documentary. This isn't a PBS documentary of everything that happened on day 1, then day 2, day 3. He puts the stories in a specific order to make a specific point. So just like we've seen before, remember in chapters 4 and 5 where it gives like 800 years worth of genealogy, and then it zeroes in on a specific story that happened. We got the whole genealogy, and then it says, now back to Adam, and he had a son named Seth. That's out of order. Same thing going on here. He's given a big long line, a big long genealogy to make a point. Then we're going to flash back just a little bit to a specific thing that happened earlier in the genealogy and explain how we got to where we are. Everybody okay? So it's not a blow-by-blow documentary. It's written to make a specific point. So don't let that flip you out if you see languages in chapter 10 and one language in chapter 11. It's okay. But he continues. The lineage of Japheth is given there. Okay? Continue on down. We see the sons of Ham starting in chapter 6. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Canaan. That might be a familiar name to you. Yeah, the son of Ham was Canaan, from whom the people who the Canaanites were descended of. Okay. It continues on down there. It gets to verse 9. talking about a guy, Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. I'm not exactly sure what all that means. It sounds like he was a hunter, probably a warrior, probably a big builder. He was a social hero, I guess you might call him. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was, what's the next word? Babel. That sounds vaguely familiar too. Yeah, okay. Now we know where that comes from. Babel and some other places that we don't care about right now. And from that he went into the land of Assyria, and he built Nineveh. That name should also sound familiar, so we can start to see where all these different places came about. How did they get in all the different places if they were all clumped together in one spot? Well, again, we already talked about that. This part of the narrative probably happened after the story we see in chapter 11, after the Tower of Babel, after everything split. These brothers and their families split. Okay, continuing on. Nineveh and some other names. Then in verse 21, to Shem also, the father of the children of Eber, and a bunch of other stuff. The sons of Shem were, and it gives a whole bunch of names there. But the point of chapter 10 here is what you see up on the screen there. It's another genealogy chapter that chronicles Noah's descendants after the flood. Just as in chapters 4 and 5, we see the development of what? The godly lines and the ungodly lines, in accordance with Noah's blessings and cursings that we saw in chapter 9, verse 24 and 27. I didn't spend a ton of time on those, nor do I intend to, but because of what had gone on, God blessed Shem, and he cursed Canaan, which was Ham's son. Why would he curse Canaan instead of Ham himself? Well, I think because it's from specifically the descendants of Canaan that we see later on in the book of Genesis and Exodus and so on and so forth. That's where the conflict really comes into play. God knew how that would happen. So he says, Canaan specifically, I will say you guys are going to be cursed and you'll be subjected to the sons of Shem. Who are the sons of Shem? Who are the sons of Shem? The Shemites, the Semites. This is where the Jewish people came from. Oh, now it's starting to fall together, isn't it? Yeah. And so just like before, where we saw the godly and the ungodly lines, here we see the lines of Japheth, we see the lines of Ham, and specifically Canaan coming down through, and we see the line of Shem. So sure enough, we won't go through all the, again, names and details here, but we see the distinctive lines coming through, and most importantly, we do see that there is still what? Enmity between the seeds, just like God said would always be there. He's still fulfilling his promise. Why would this be important to the very first readers of this book? The first readers were the descendants of Israel, the children of Israel, walking around. If you're an Israelite reading this book for the first time, you have kind of a vague, maybe foggy notion of where your family comes from, but now you read this and you say, aha, what? God is taking us to the land of Canaan. Yeah, land of promise, the land of Canaan. And in that land is the Canaanites. Now I know who the Canaanites are. They are under God's curse because of what happened back in Noah's day. And God promised that someday they would be subjected to us as descendants of Shem. Now, okay, now they know where they are. Now they know where their place is, how they fit into the big story, again, a little bit better. That makes sense with everybody? Everybody okay? As we said, let's zero back in a little bit on a story that happened earlier on in that genealogy sequence. Chapter 11. Now, the whole world had one language and the same words. Why would all the human population have the same language? Because it came from one family, and at that point they probably weren't, super huge. There's enough to build a big city, build a big tower. It's not like there's just 8 or 9 guys walking around. But they were all one family. They all hopped off the boat in the same place. They were all raising families, starting community in the same place. Verse 2, and as people had migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And that's a problem because God said to spread out, multiply, and subdue the earth. They said, aha, no, I think I have a better idea. Why don't we all band together, cooperate, and we can do whatever we want to do? Continuing on in verse 5, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do now will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and therefore confuse their language, so they may not understand one another's speech. One society, all working together, they can do what they want to do. And nothing, God obviously can stop them, but nothing can stop these people because they're unified, they're all one language, they live in one place. That sounds almost scarily like another situation that happened not too awful long ago. What situations does it sound like? Everybody speaks the same language, they're getting together, they're doing what they want to do, and what they want to do is probably not super righteous, they're not following God. Everybody's in a group. What does it sound like? Sounds like almost a repeat of the situation before the flood, doesn't it? Yeah. And if they're all in one group, the godly line and the ungodly line, and everybody's here together, what's going to happen before too long? Probably the same type of situation we had before the flood. But now we have another problem. Why? Because God said, I will never allow this to happen again. So what happens if the whole Earth's community gets together in one big ball, they turn rebellious, which we know is what happens when humanity gets together? What's going to happen? The same situation. But God said, I will not allow that to happen. I will never flood the earth again. God has to step in and remedy the situation as a means of what? Keeping his promise. So sure enough, he does. He comes down. And verse 7, come, let us go down, therefore, confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, the name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. This time he did not preserve the line by sending a flood, did he? He preserved it by simply confusing the language. So one day this family woke up and they're speaking Scandinavian, and the other family woke up and they're speaking Zulu from Africa, and they say, and they can't. And if you can't understand these people and they're weird and we don't like them anymore, and so they say, well, I'm getting out of here because you're weird. No, I'm getting out of here because you're weird. And so they split and they start to do their own thing. But once they spread out, now they're not all intermingling. And the righteous family of Shem can develop, and the other families can develop, and sure enough, God's promise is preserved to the people. Everybody okay? Yeah. So, yes, they didn't fill up the earth. They tried to make a name for themselves. They had the pride, they had the wickedness, the rebellion. The Tower of Babel simply shows us that sin is still in the world, that Noah was not the ultimate seed, and that we need more than a global flood to get rid of the curse that sin brought to us, because sin is still here. So God had to confuse the language. He had to spread out the people and allow society to continue. That brings us to chapter 11, verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. We're flying through chapters now, aren't we? We are zinging through. This is chapter 6 of God's chapters, the sixth time he divides it up in this way. This is another genealogy. What's going on with these things? The generations of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered some guy with a weird name 2 years after the flood. Shem lived and he fathered this guy 500 years. He had other sons and daughters. I will not read all the names to you, but these are the descendants of Shem. In the previous genealogy, he gave a summary of all the branches, didn't he? But now he zeroes on one specifically, the descendants of Shem. Again, why the descendants of Shem? Why didn't he pick one of the others to zero in on? Because this is the what? It's the chosen line through which God would fulfill his promise. And it's also the descendants from which Israel comes, which were the readers of the book. That's what was of interest to them. So he continues on down, a whole bunch of names there. We get down to verse 26. Terah lived 70 years, he fathered three guys, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Next verse. Verse 27 of chapter 11. Now these are the generations of Terah. These are the generations of. How'd you like that? We covered a whole chapter in like 45 seconds. God divides a whole chapter of his book to the descendants of Shem. Again, why? I think we know the answer by now, because he's delineating that special line. But now we're going to focus on a very specific individual. Beyond just all the family of Shem, again, we're going to narrow into a specific offspring of Shem several generations later. These are the generations of Terah. I guess before I forget to do this, several clicks behind. Chapter 11, so even during the wicked time of the Tower of Babel, God's continually keeping his promise to mankind of preserving himself a righteous line of seed through which the curse will one day be eliminated. And we see the generations there, how it happens. Terah fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father, Terah, in the land of his kindred, Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took wives. Sarai was one of them. The name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, etc., etc. Sarai was barren. She had no child. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, and his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan. That sounds familiar. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. And I'm going to assume it's just weird coincidence that the dead brother of Abraham and the name of this town are the same. If anybody has more insights on that, let me know, because I'm kind of curious. It's just kind of weird that it happened that way. The brother Haran died, and then they left, and they settled in a town named Haran. Maybe that's just a weird coincidence. I don't know. But if anybody has an idea on that, please tell me later, because I'm curious. But they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So they said, we are going to be leaving Ur of the Chaldees. We're going to go to Canaan. But halfway there, they came across the Motel 6 in this town called Haran. And they never quite made it all the way. And so they just stopped there. They didn't quite get to where they were supposed to be going. And so finally they waited until a few years later, whatever it was, and Terah, the father, died. This leaves Abram and his family in chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And we really want to take a look at these few verses, because these are super important in the Old Testament. Chapter 12, verse 1 says this, Now the Lord said to Abram, Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. This is a very big turning point in human history, isn't it? Up until now, God has, in a general way, he's preserved the lines, and he said, I will always maintain the godly line for me so that I can bring forth the seed. But now he specifically zeroes in on one individual, which would produce one specific family. I said, you are the specific family now that I'm going to bless. Of all the people on the earth, I choose you. You're of the lineage that I've preserved, but of this whole family even now, I will preserve you specifically. And he gives kind of like a three-part promise here, doesn't it? Now the Lord said to Abraham, Go from your country and your kindred, your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I will give you what? First of all, he promises them a home, some land, right? I will give you the land. That's number one. Fast forward a little bit, by the way, to today. We know that the people from Abraham are the Jewish people, the Israelites. And we know that that land that God ended up giving them was what used to be the land of Canaan, which is now the country of Israel. We all know the history. Strangely enough, what has happened? After a long time of being gone against all odds, etc., the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, are back in the land of Israel. Isn't it amazing how God's promises just find a way of becoming fulfilled all the time? He's always right. How does that happen? Isn't that amazing? And now the people there are trying to, even to this day, fight and eliminate and get the Israelites out of the land. Did you ever wonder why people always hate the Jewish people? And throughout history, it's always the poor Jews that are being persecuted. Why would that be? Why do you think that would be? I think it goes back to the book of Genesis. And it will always be that way. I think it's not just a political battle at all. It's not even a cultural battle. It is an absolute spiritual battle. Satan knows that these are God's chosen people. He knows that God loves these people. He's promised to preserve them, and Satan wants to do everything to destroy that. And so no matter who it is, whether it's the Nazis, whether it's the Arabs, whether it's, in the medieval times, even the Catholic Church and the Protestants sometimes, everybody throughout history has hated the Jews and tried to eliminate them. And they always fail. And not only do they fail to eliminate them, they fail to eliminate their identity, and they failed to eliminate them coming back as a nation in the very land that God had promised. So we read in the news of whoever it is that's taken the latest turn of trying to attack Israel. And they think, oh, they're getting in over their heads this time. Oh, they can't afford another war. I just saw another headline the other day. Can Israel afford another war? Should they just kind of back off and take it easy now? Should they stop being so aggressive in defending their national sovereignty? Will they survive another attack? And we think, what? I'm pretty sure they will. Yeah, I think they'll be okay. Now, that's not to say that we don't, whatever happens, let the bombs fall, obviously, because it could be a very rough ride. Survival could be a very painful ride. I mean, we want to keep the people safe and all that. So it's not like, yeah, whatever, it's no worries. Because we want to keep the people safe there. But ultimately speaking, we know that Israel is not going anywhere. They will survive. God promised so. He's kept it that way through millennia of human history, and he will continue to do so. That's a rabbit trail. Sorry. Let's continue. But he promises these people the land. I'll give you a land that I'll show you. Continuing on, verse 2, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. He promises him not only the land, but he promises them that he will become a nation, a father of a nation here, and later we see that's expanded to a father of many nations. We'll see that later. The land, the nation, and finally the most important part of all, verse 3, you will be a blessing. I will bless those that bless you. Him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. All the families of the earth will be blessed. How does one guy, one family, bless all the entire population of the rest of the world? This is a continuation of that same promise, isn't it? Yeah. So he promises Abraham that in his family would be the ultimate seed as well. Now that's God's part. That's what God said that he would do for Abraham. In return, what does Abraham have to do for God as part of this deal? Check back in verses 1 through 3. What do you see there? God's part is to provide the land, the nation, and the seed. What is Abraham's obligation? Everybody find it? Keep looking. Keep looking. I see some heads shaking. Keep looking. If you're still looking, stop looking. Keep looking. There is no requirement of Abraham, is there? It's not there. God said, I will do this for you. I will give you the land. I'll turn you into a nation. I will give you the ultimate seed. This is what I will do for you. Period. And I think this is an extremely important part. This covenant is what we call completely what? Unconditional. It is a one-sided agreement. God says, I will do this for you no matter what, because I have decided to do this for you. That is why. Because I have chosen you. I've preserved your line. I've preserved the family throughout the years. But now you are it. I have chosen your family to be my conduit, to fulfill my promises. I will keep my promises no matter what. Nobody can stop me. I'm God. But I will do this for you. And there are no ifs or as long as. Why would this be important, do you think? I can think of one huge reason why this is important. Because anytime there is an if on humanity's part, we have an amazing ability of messing it up. What if God had said, Abraham, I will give this to you if you do X, Y, and Z, and if your family continues to do X, Y, and Z? What would have happened to this covenant at some point? They'd have messed it up so bad, and they'd have gotten the boot centuries, millennia ago. They would have messed it up. In fact, we can see, if you know your Bible history at all, the descendants of Abraham, the Israelites, they did mess up all the time. That was under a different covenant we'll get to later. But this one is completely unconditional. Abraham, there is nothing you can do to mess this up. It is not possible for you, God says. I will give you this stuff. I will give you land. I will give you the nation. I will provide the ultimate seed through you. There is nothing you can do to screw this up, because I am God, and I have declared that you are it. Wow, how's that a profound promise? I mean, Abraham just won the ultimate lottery right there. I mean, not that it was random, you know what I'm saying, but he's the luckiest guy on earth. God chose him of all the people on the earth to make this promise to. Why Abraham specifically? I mean, I guess I'm not entirely sure. To bring glory to himself, God says, that's for sure. But God chose Abraham because he chose Abraham, ultimately is what it is. And there's nothing Abraham can do to mess it up. So it's completely unconditional. And as we already talked about, we find out that this covenant here is really not a new promise at all, is it? Because we started out with the promise in chapter 3, verse 15 to Eve. God has preserved the line all the way through, and really this is just simply another layer of that same promise, is it not? God says, now specifically your family is the one that I will focus in and preserve, and I will make you a nation, I'll make you great, I will protect you. Those that bless you and are good to you, I'll be good to them. You're going to have my favor in that way. Those that are mean to you and try to destroy you, you've got my attention. I will try to destroy them, and I will wipe them out. Those that bless you, those that curse you, that curse, you will be a blessing to all the people on the earth. And he's done that in a number of ways, but the most notable way, of course, is providing the family for the ultimate seed that saves us. Wowzers. And that's a fantastic story. So, verse 4, Abraham went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. I'm in verse 4.5 here. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his brother's son, all the possessions they had gathered, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through to the place of Shechem, to the oak there. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land right here. You remember when I promised you land a little while ago? This is the land I will give you. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from then he continued to move on and stuff. So God identifies the land where Abraham would be given. It is this land right here, the land of Canaan. That sounds familiar again, doesn't it? Canaan was cursed earlier in Noah's day. Say, the sons of Shem, you'll be subservient to them. Now the son of Shem walks into the land of Canaan, and God says what? Descendant of Shem, here is your land. Guess what? It's the land of Canaan. Oh, surprise. And sure enough, God's promises come true again. Just a couple minutes, I want to hit this very quickly. And this is a significant story. You tell me why when we're done reading, and I'll read it super fast. Now there was a famine in the land, verse 10, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. Because of the famine, he left the land. This will happen again later on, by the way. Verse 11, when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman that's beautiful in appearance, and then when the Egyptians see you, they'll say, hey, this is his wife. Then they'll kill me, but they'll let you live. Say you're my sister so that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. So when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. She must have been a super gorgeous senior citizen because they were elderly at that point. I don't know what to say. She's got super good genes, I guess, a great skincare regimen, something like that. But she got down there and they saw her and they said, ooh la la. And so they come to Abram and said, oh, look, here's my sister. Hey, great. Can we have your sister? Sure, why not? And off they go. Great decision, guys. Not marital advice, probably. Verse 15, and when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abraham. He had sheep, he had oxen, he had donkeys, male servants, all kinds of goodies. Pharaoh said, because you've given me such a gorgeous woman, here's a bunch of nice stuff for you. I will pay you handsomely. Verse 17, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abraham and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Somehow that was revealed to Pharaoh. Why did you say she's my sister so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. What a weird old bizarre story. Seems out of place. I mean, here goes Abram, down to Egypt. Hey, look, my wife is really gorgeous, but it's really my sister. Why don't you take her? Okay. And then God pounds on Pharaoh for a while, and he says, oh, you better take her back. Okay. And off they go, and now he's rich. What's going on here? Why this weird throwaway story? What's happening? Why is this here? That's always the question we ask. Why is this? Why did God put this in here? Historically, what do we learn? We kind of see how Abram traveled around and he went down and there's famine in Canaan. Fine. Morally, what do we see? Probably not a great idea to lie and give away your wife. I think that's fair. Okay? Gentlemen, take note. But more importantly, put it in context of what we see. Theologically, what do we see here? What just happened? What just happened in context of what we've already seen and read? Think about this. What just happened? Two things. One, God said, those that bless you I will bless, those that curse you I will curse. And Pharaoh just tried to take the wife, even though he didn't know it, and God just pounded on Pharaoh. He's keeping his promise there. But I think there's an even bigger one, isn't there? Earlier we heard that Sarai had no children. Now they go down to Egypt, and what does Abram try to do? He tries to give away his wife. Thinking, God promised me a seed, a family, a nation. To do that, I need to have offspring. Now I just gave away my wife. Now it's much more difficult to produce offspring. If I have no wife, I also have no seed. What happens to God's promise if I have no wife? I just gave away my wife. God's promise is once again in jeopardy because people have screwed it up. This is a recurring theme. Okay, I'm starting to notice this. What does God have to do to keep his promise to Abram? He has to step in. He has to pound Pharaoh on the head in a way that he painfully recognizes. He says, what have I done? So that the king of Egypt is, in a sense, almost bowing to Abraham, saying, please take your wife back. Here's a bunch of stuff. Just get out of here. And I don't even know what God did to Pharaoh at this point. I don't even know. But it was severe enough to intimidate the king of Egypt to say, get out of here, take your stuff, and go. And your safe passage, just get out of my land, because whatever God is doing to me is so severe. That's what God had to do to step in to preserve his promise again. Because if there's no wife, there's no seed. If there's no seed, God's promise is null and void. God will not allow that to happen. Now all of a sudden it's a pretty important story, isn't it? Yeah, it's pretty meaningful. It's not just a one-off throwaway after all. The clock is killing me. But we will continue next week, so let's pray and we'll dismiss. Dear God, we thank you again this morning for the stories in Genesis. Some of these stories that seem to like just loose leaf, bizarre, out of place stories, they really do all fit together. And we can see how it all comes together to show your faithfulness, your mercy, at the same time your judgment and your righteousness, your promise-keeping qualities and your character, who you are. Thank you for revealing yourself to us through your word in all these ways and in all these stories. I pray that we'd continue to discern what you have for us in these books. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Thank you very much. You're dismissed. If you want to read ahead on your own time this week, I encourage you to do so. You can tell exactly where we left off. Thank you.